Hello, everyone. This is Mark Anthony with Dr. Ryan Bielecki. We're here to talk about SpineCo.com. And I'm excited because we have a great mind today. And the reason why I say that, I believe that every entrepreneur has a different type of mindset. What's really cool about Dr. Ryan is we're going to hear about how he started his practice and if he came from that entrepreneurial cloth, which will be pretty cool. And we're going to be talking about, SpineCo Chiropractic, about what they're doing, how they're changing lives, how they're putting restoration into people where they were off track to get them back on track. Thank you so much, Dr. Ryan, for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is really exciting. I'm happy to be here.
No, definitely. Let's get to know who Dr. Ryan is. Just tell us your story. How did you get into chiropractic and then starting your own practice? Was this already in the family?
No, definitely not in the family. I was raised by two Chicago police officers. I grew up not even really knowing what a chiropractor was. I found this on my own entirely. So years ago, I was 14 years old. I had an old injury. I had fractured my left leg in half. I had the same surgery that Conor McGregor famously had. The titanium rod was placed into my leg. My leg was shattered. And not to, hopefully gross out the audience, but it was bent at about a 90-degree angle. I had fractured my tibia in 3 places and my fibula in 2. And, going through the rehab process later in life, I was a baseball player, and I began having non-contact injuries kind of all over the place. My shoulder would go out, and then eventually it went to my spine, and I started having cervical issues with my neck, and I started having low back issues. And some of the guys that I was working out with at the time would, come into the gym and they'd be like, "Oh, I saw the chiropractor today. I feel like $1 million." And at the time, that didn't carry a whole lot of weight. I wouldn't even know where to find a chiropractor at that time. I was probably 17 or 18 then, when the non-contact injuries started adding up. And the only solution I knew back then was ibuprofen meant I'd be playing. So I played through a lot of that and kind of would just hide it and would put on more of that toughness persona, and that wasn't aging very well for me at the time. And shortly after that, there was a batting practice session where I took a swing and I really couldn't get back around. I had a shooting pain in my low back that was running down into my glutes and down the back of my leg, and I got really scared about it. I wanted the opportunity to keep playing baseball. That sport means a lot to me. And, there's the famous Wally Pibb story. If you sit out, you don't want Lou Gehrig to come take your place. So anyway, to make a longer story shorter, I decided to go see Dr. Tom Tulios. He's the owner of Greenwood Chiropractic on the south side of the city. And I went from barely being able to, stand up to fielding ground balls 2 weeks later. And I knew I always wanted to get into the medical profession. Science has tended to be my best grades. And I was just like, wow, that was the cool. And just the way he spoke about it and the energy around it and what he was doing I was so unfamiliar with that from the medical space. All I knew was Western medicine. All I knew was physical therapy, pills, and injections.
Right.
I knew at least at that age, that wasn't a route I wanted to rely on. I wanted something that was a little bit more sustainable. So that's where I found chiropractic. That's where I found the inspiration to continue giving back to that. And he was able to find out things that were wrong with me that no other medical professional had explained. And a lot of it tied back to the leg fracture. My left tibia did not heal in the same length as it was originally. And that caused me to develop a functional scoliosis, and I never rehabbed appropriately. And yeah,
is that what got you to kind of get into your line of work, or
yes.
how did that? So that's basically from there. You said, I want to see if I can even probably fix myself or fix others.
Yeah. Yeah. I was exploring fields that I wanted to get into. So I spoke to more chiropractors, I spoke to physical therapists, I spoke to surgeons, and nobody spoke as highly of their own profession as some of the chiropractors that I was interacting with at that time.
Mm.
And there was one chiropractor that I had met out in Kansas City who was just like, look, it's the only doctor's office that you can walk out of feeling better than you walked into. And that kind of stuck with me. And I wish I remember the doctor's name. And it is very, I mean, for the most part, it's really, really true. You know, if you go to the urgent
It's
care
so
or
true.
something like that, they'll send you somewhere to go get, antibiotics or, some sort of pharmaceutical or, even injections take time to work. And chiropractic really is the only office that you can walk out being like, wow,
Well, I love that.
wow factor. Yeah.
No, it really does. I remember, I don't know if you know about or heard about Shockwave.
Yeah.
I started, well, because the chiropractor I was going to, he had Shockwave. He says, hey, you want to give it a shot? You're telling me you had a little bit of pain in your back. And I tried that. I was like, what the heck? This sucker works,
Yeah.
but neither to say, one of the things I respect a lot about, especially chiropractors, is people don't realize the ongoing training and you're having to learn. It's not just, it's not like, oh, okay, I just go through 4 or 5 years and I'm done. There's so much training and, getting to know these newer devices that are out and that are to help the human body. So let's maybe kind of talk a little bit about not just chiropractic, but when did you start your company? Was it hard to start out in the beginning? How was that?
Yeah. So as of March, SpineCo Chiropractic has been open 2 years. It's been, it's been a really fun journey. It's been every day's been a new challenge. So I started out pretty much myself in a small room. I had a table, I had a small desk, and I had a computer. Um, and that became, you know, 3 rooms and 4 rooms and a front
Mhm.
desk. And then we were actually, as you just mentioned, shockwave therapy. We have focused shockwave therapy in the office. We were able to bring in non-surgical spinal decompression tables into the office. It was challenging early on because I didn't have any sort of, well, ownership background. I didn't have any entrepreneurs in the family, no one who could really show me how to do these things. A lot of it was, figuring out, you got to get all your legal documents and you got to set up the bank account and then you have to figure out how, all of the mathematics behind it works in order to, make sure you can keep the lights on to keep helping people. So that was probably the largest obstacle. In terms of from the chiropractic side of things, that's always a learning experience because like they say, everybody's different. Well, every patient is different. They really are. Everybody has their own sets of physics and every patient is relative to their own situation. The construction worker isn't going to break down like the IT employee. The librarian isn't going to break down like the EMT. So you have to take into account where these people are coming from and try to figure out, okay, A plus B equals C. What is going on in your life that's breaking you down? And then what sort of variable do we have to add or subtract from the equation in order to
Mhm.
help you achieve a different result? So, the learning never stops. And it's been challenging, it's been fun. We're continuing to grow the practice and we're continuing to help a lot of people, and that's been really special.
That's awesome. Tell us maybe a little bit about the practice, for the viewers out there, and if you can maybe just let them know more about the area, surrounding areas that you're servicing, and because I know that people travel to come see you, and that'd be a great start. And then also just some of the niches that you're doing, whether it be working with the spine, working with the back or the neck, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. We try to take on a lot of discogenic cases, auto injury cases, is really what I would say our niche is. In terms of our general area, the Chicagoland area is a very diverse. I mean, it's a very diverse city. The suburbs are, they come with a lot of diversity. So you see all sorts of different types of people. Where I first practiced was more of a very blue collar area. So like I had mentioned, relative to the type of human being I was working with,
Hmm.
where we are now in Downers Grove, Illinois, it's a bit more of a white collar community, but there's still plenty of blue collar people around. So when you deal with people who do manual labor, you will find the issues go from the spine, then to the extremities, and blue collar people tend to push their issues off a little bit further
Hmm.
than the white collar employee. Um, so in terms of different challenges and things like that, I'm trying to articulate this in a good way for the viewers so that they kind of understand the diversity of the people that come into the office. But a lot of people, the radicular issue from the construction worker will be different from the radicular issue of someone who would work at a desk just based on postural indifferences. People who work blue collar jobs tend to work in front of them or above them or around them, and someone
Hmm.
who's sitting at a desk, breaks down more into a flexed state. You see kind of that hunchback posture a little bit more. So when we're dealing with something like, let's say, a disc, we the approach at which I would take to treat that is, um, much different. So we utilize things like shockwave therapy and non-surgical spinal decompression in the office to make the chiropractic care work better. Chiropractic adjustments are very, very good for, making dysfunctional joint segments functional again. Non-surgical spinal decompression is really good at, taking mechanical stress off of discs. And then shockwave therapy, it's a really unique piece of technology because it's a way that you can approach people's pain without drugs, without injections. Um, it's a much more natural approach, but it also is a very advanced piece of technology that you should be, very, very careful with. So that's a lot of what we do and a lot of what we see. I hope that answered your
Oh no, that
question.
was perfect. So for the audience that doesn't know really what shockwave is, what type of people have you seen come in that you've maybe helped that shockwave has worked pretty well with?
Yeah. So when we first got Shockwave into the office, you read all of this awesome research that's coming out about it and all the different things that it treats, right? You say, okay, Shockwave can treat shoulder issues and carpal tunnel and plantar fasciitis and osteoarthritic knee pains and SI joint pains. For the audience, that's the little bony back dimple that you can kind of feel in your low back. A lot of people will commonly mistake that as hip pain. The SI joint sits right above, the sciatic nerve, so that can be a little bit of a sensitive spot. So when we first brought the technology into the practice, we were running these different campaigns for about 8 months where we would try to get people with different ailments to come on in. So we ran like a 2-month campaign for shoulder pain, and we try to get patients who are dealing with rotator cuff injuries, labral injuries, supraspinatus injuries. Then we ran a campaign for patellar issues, osteoarthritic knee
Mhm.
pains, plantar fasciitis pains, and sciatic issues. And what we found was really, really interesting. We had our best results treating plantar fasciitis and SI joint pain.
Hmm.
So our results with shoulder issues were around, 50-50. About half the patients got better. The other half needed to be referred out. The knee patients really just kind of depended. It did much better for osteoarthritic knee pains than it did for, patellar tendinopathies, and which contrary, which was contrary to a lot of the research that we had read. But uh, SI joint pain really gets the best results. So
Well,
when the SI joint is inflamed, even if it's causing, minor or major sciatic type referral, we were seeing results in as few as, 3 to 4 treatments. And then, kind of depending on how many treatments the patient would need. Uh, but patients with really inflamed SI joints sometimes struggle to, just for the audience, the adjustment in which you would lay a patient on your side and sort of do that body drop onto the SI joint when that's very inflamed. Well, that can be a very, very sensitive adjustment. So it's really, really great that we're able to bring in shockwave therapy to sort of approach that without having to, contort you, drop on you, and sort of take the slow route.
Okay, I like that. So is shockwave more of like an acoustic therapy where it goes through the bone and then it attacks, or I don't like to use the word attack, but I'll use it attacks the inflammation to break it up so that the blood flow is able to be more restored to normal. I'm just
So you're not far
or
off.
am I kind of off? I'm trying to get on.
No, not necessarily. So it works through a process called mechanotransduction, which is essentially
Mhm.
a physical force um, that, I mean, it's essentially where you turn physical force into intracellular signaling, realistically.
Mhm.
So there's an acoustic stimulus. Would you use like a focused shock wave? It'll sort of hyper focus into one region, and
Okay.
then that is where the cells will convert the physical stimulus into biomechanical signals to promote, remodeling of the tissue
Mhm.
and, alter, pain modulation. So from an inflammatory standpoint, it actually promotes pro and anti-inflammatory cytokines into the area. So the anti-inflammatory cytokines, so if there's inflammation sitting within the region, yes, to some degree, if you were to take the example of like placing a speaker next to a body of water, you would watch the sound waves, move the
I
water,
like that.
right?
Yeah.
So it will, to a certain degree, yes, sort of push some of that inflammation out. But because it is a physical force, it is to some degree breaking down the tissue to build it back up. So
Mm.
what it will do is it will signal the proliferation of tenocytes and fibroblasts, which are connective tissue cells, right? Tenocytes, that's like for tendons. So if you have like, you know, I mean, if you have any sort of inflammation around the tendon or you have micro tearing in the tendon, it will signal the proliferation of the cells that can help remodel the matrix and try to repair the area. It will stimulate a process called angiogenesis, which for the viewers is essentially just creating new blood vessels in the area or signaling the local blood vessels in the area essentially to refill the area with blood. If you can get more blood flow to the area, you can get more oxygen to the area, you can reoxygenate and start to heal those tissues. So that process takes, about, as far as I have read and as far as we have experienced with our own patients, about 6 to 8 weeks post treatment for those sort of effects to occur. So we've had patients leave after shockwave treatment plans and they're like, oh, I don't know if it worked. And then we call them in 2 months and they're like, oh my
They're like,
gosh, I feel fantastic. So when we first got the technology, because it's newer in the United States, it's been used over in Europe for quite some time for musculoskeletal issues. You don't really know what you're going to expect. You can read what you're going to expect. You bring these things into the office and I mean, everybody is realistically just hoping for the best when they bring some sort of new modality into the practice, and you hope you're doing it right. And you know, the device that we use is the pulse wave, and they're really great. They sent all sorts of training videos. We made sure to get certified, really to ensure the best results for our patients.
yeah, a lot of people don't realize that like the NBA and NFL, a lot of them utilize
Yeah,
that
the UFC.
machine. I mean, especially the UFC. So I know that you do a lot of disc, and so with the disc, I know that of course, you're having to use like decompression. What type of decompression, like, do you do for the spine for helping with that? Like, how does that work? As in, if someone were to come into your office and
Yeah. So let's use an example. So one of the most commonly degenerated discs or injured discs is C5, C6. So between the fifth and sixth bone in the cervical spine, this can cause radicular issues down between the shoulder blades all the way down to the fingertips. So if you have a disc issue that is encroaching on the foramen and causing, nerve root compression, ultimately what the goal is to set the patient up on the device, and the angle at which you decompress the cervical spine from will dictate which disc you're trying to approach, right? So it's not just some gradual hold and pull and pray, So there is a physics to it, and then ultimately the patient will experience about a 10-minute treatment that will go through cycles. So it will hold the patient, like for example, a new patient would go on there for 10 minutes at our program settings and probably experience, we would put the max amount of weight of 15 pounds of decompression, right? The
Mhm.
head weighs anywhere from 8 to 12 pounds, depending on who you're asking and who you're weighing.
All right.
So we would start with a light amount of weight. The bones in the cervical spine are around 2 ounces in weight for the average human. So you don't want to yank them. We want to gently pull the head from the spine for about 30 seconds. This way we can reduce the mechanical stress on the disc. And then what we will do is we will let off to about the weight of the head. So on average, we would probably do about 10 pounds for 20 seconds. And then you would want to do, ultimately these cycles in order to encourage fluid flow, right? Because the discs are full of fluid.
Mhm.
And so we want to reduce the mechanical stress, put it back on, create that pumping mechanism. This way, the arteries that perfuse the disc can sort of pump the blood back into the disc space and encourage proper healing ultimately over time. Now, with that being said, once you have a disc that is injured, it doesn't quite uninjure. It will heal, resorb. There will be some, immunomodulating factors that will heal it to a certain degree. But the more mechanical stress you can get off of it, research shows that you will have the better long-term results.
I like that. It's interesting. I had a slip disc. I'm talking many years ago, a couple decades ago, and I could not sleep on a bed. I was in so much pain, so I had to sleep on the floor.
Mm.
And believe it or not, I went to go see a chiropractor, and before I saw the chiropractor, I was seeing all the doctors, and they were saying, you need to do this. We need to do surgery. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to do surgery. And they're like, you're going to have to get a different type of job. Long story short, I went to the chiropractor. Within 30 days, my disc was healed up. And he wasn't only, utilizing decompression, but I noticed he said, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to start swimming laps. And what's interesting is it took a lot of the pressure off. When I was swimming the laps, I was building the muscles, I think, around it. I'm no doctor, but I'm just thinking in my head, I think I was building some type of muscles around it. From there, I've never had any disc problems since then. Or maybe I'm lucky.
That's really amazing too. Well, it makes sense. Aquatic therapy really does get a lot of great results because you're taking the gravitational factor out of it, right? A lot of the
Hmm.
mechanical stress on our discs comes from the acceleration of gravity. So that that constant smushing, every action is an equal and opposite reaction, right? So we're pushing on the ground is pushing back on us, and over time, that's why people get quote unquote shorter as they get older, as their discs start to dehydrate and they start to,
And then break down.
yeah, they lose discal height, they lose, the facet joints start to, degrade. And that is one thing that I think the common person isn't explained to well enough, is that the body will always break down over time, right? And wellness and health and medicine, a lot of times, is what you stay consistent with,
Hmm.
right? So, like, you were consistent with your therapies, and
Yeah, big time.
you still see a chiropractor, so you're still consistent with your care. Uh, and the idea of something that provides a long-term solution, if you're going to make the argument for surgery, it's like, okay, yes, if you fuse C5 and C6, your long-term solution is that C5 and C6 will no longer essentially, mechanically crush each other because they have this fusion. Um, well, what do you suppose happens to C4 and C5 and C6 and C7? Well, now those areas now mechanically have to compensate for the lack of motion that was in C5 and C6.
Hmm. Hmm.
And, you just kind of create, over time we'll create a different problem. Not to say that some people don't get great results with surgeries, because some
Right.
some do, but anytime you can avoid being put under is worth doing, really, if you take a look into the statistics of, human error. So a lot of times anesthesia is the scary one, as good as it is. So,
Exactly.
it's awesome that you stay consistent with the chiropractic care. So same thing with strength training, same thing with diet, all of that. If you work out really, really hard for 5 years and you get in really good shape and your diet was really, really good for 5 years and you really hyper focused on your health and then you just stopped doing it, do you think you would still receive the long-term benefits? Yes, to a certain degree, those 5 years
Yeah.
will have paid dividends, but if you stop doing it, well, your body's just going to start breaking down again. So,
I look at it like a car. We put gas in it once a week.
yeah.
I mean, you start putting gas, it's not going to run that well.
Mhm.
What I love about chiropractic is that it's, 25 years ago, people were just like, chiropractor, what are you talking about? Now people are like, yes, because there's so many desk jobs. We've got COVID to thank, a little sarcasm there. And, to keep people working at home. So the adjustments really, they're integral to us because when we sleep at night, I mean, how many of us wake up on the wrong side of the bed? I mean, with the pillow, we weren't meant to sleep on pillows. Let's just be honest. It's just not the way that it was. To be honest with you, I don't even sleep with a pillow. I sleep with like a real thin one
Mm.
because my neck gets crunched up.
Yeah. Funny enough, I would say, I guess I don't have the real number, but if I had to guess, I would say at least over 70% of the patients that don't come in via like auto accident, when you ask them, okay, you're taking the patient history, what happened? And most of the time, the answer is, I woke up with it. So I always ask, I'm like, okay, well, what positions are you sleeping in? And, XYZ. A lot of times, people who are having pain when sleeping, the answer I hear is they sleep face down on their belly, um,
Wow,
which, if you
that's different.
take the time to break that down, can make sense. Well, a lot of things are a factor. What kind of bed are they sleeping with? How many pillows underneath their head?
Mm-hmm.
But when you sleep in the prone position and you have to rotate your head, and if you're doing, if you're rotating your head left every
Mm-hmm.
night, 365 nights a year, and let's just say for any instance, people are getting 8 hours of sleep. I would love if people got 8 hours of sleep, by the way. No one comes in telling me they got 8 hours of sleep, but please get 8 hours of sleep. It's so good for you. Um, you're spending a third of your life in this position right here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, imagine sitting on an 8-hour car ride with your head against the window, like,
You're gonna be in pain.
and then having to get out of it. It's going to be less comfortable. Obviously, sitting, results in more axial pressure um, than lying down. Lying down does, but it, you start to correlate things when you start seeing enough people,
Mm-hmm.
and really start doing practical medicine.
A question that I have. So, what would it look like if somebody were to come into your office right now? Like, what's the protocol? Do they make an appointment and then is it like a 10-minute consultation? How does that work?
Sure. Yeah. So most patients will book an appointment, come on in, and we would schedule a physical exam. So we would do everything from, we would test your nerves, we would do neurological exam, orthopedic exams, range of motion, postural, We would palpate for subluxations, and barring on the patient's history, if there's any sort of radicular component, I am a huge fan of sending patients out for imaging because
Oh, wow.
there are cases, obviously, does everyone quote unquote need imaging to make their pain go away? No, but that's not necessarily the type of practice I have. I am in the practice of getting my patients healthy and trying to keep them there.
Looking at the whole body.
Correct. Yeah. Taking more of a holistic approach because, like I used before, A plus B equals C. If you go back to doing what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. So we need to, apply a new variable. So usually we would do the exam, and then I will have them go out and get either an X-ray or an MRI because I don't have an X-ray in my office just yet. That's something we're working on. This way we can make it more convenient for patients. And then you would come back in during your second visit. We would review the results from the examination and your imaging. If there are any correlations, we would discuss them with the patient. Usually at this point, we would be comfortable enough to start with some basic adjusting, depending on if the patient has ever been adjusted before, who was adjusting them before. If you were to get adjusted by 5 different chiropractors, I would bet every dollar I've ever made that all of them would feel pretty different.
Oh, yeah.
So I always let patients know, I'm like, look, we're going to hyperfocus on the target areas. And then from there, we will begin to take a little bit more of a holistic approach. Let's focus on the areas that we found during the exam. If that doesn't seem to be a positive approach. At this point, we've probably done a couple of adjustments. Then we will start seeing if they're, what the direct issue is and what your compensational issues are. And then by the third visit, typically we sit down and then we discuss the treatment plan. So, obviously that looks very different for everybody. Someone who has numbness and tingling going down to the feet for 2 years is going to have a different treatment plan than someone who has had, a facet injury for 2 weeks. And then once we get towards the end of the care plan, well, then we start discussing, okay, well, how are we going to keep you feeling good? From a wellness standpoint, like we mentioned before, your wellness is what you're consistent with. And what's so beautiful about chiropractic is you can really fit it into your day. A lot of people will make arguments for getting, biweekly massages or some people do wellness physical therapy. Good for them. Fantastic. With such a busy world that we live in, the phenomena of chiropractic is so amazing because you can, be in and out of the office. You can work on a lot of your mechanical issues. You have the same person with volume keeping an eye on the progression or regression of your body. And, it's really, really amazing. So we do encourage a lot of our patients to continue with wellness care, and a lot of them do. Sometimes they, go on vacations and things like that, and that, life happens. But for the most part, people do a really good job of taking care of themselves when you tell them how to do it. So,
Especially these days.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, we have so much, I would say, internet stress. It's not even like, if that makes sense. Things have changed, I would say, in the past 20 years. It wasn't like it was 20 years ago. We've got a lot more, now we got the phone. That's basically our lifeline. Think about it. When was the last time you actually left your phone at home and went for a drive? That doesn't really.
In the past year, but
Okay.
before
Yeah.
that, it makes a good point.
Yeah, we had like a kung fu grip on it. That's why I like to play pickleball. So I when I'm playing for a couple of hours, I just got the phone in the car, leave me alone.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how when you're away from it, you're like, wow, I feel pretty good. It's
Yeah.
it's interesting, but what would you say that would be a good like just for like maintenance plan for just say chiropractic? Would you recommend every other weekend? I mean, every other week, or does it just depend on the person?
Again, relative to the person's situation. So someone like I do have a couple patients, they play, adult rec volleyball, but they play like a tournament every weekend and they play 3 nights a week.
Well,
And when you really check out the volume of that, I'm like, look, you're participating in this as much as like, an athlete who would do this for, their job, right? Some level of professional athlete. Like you're playing many, many times a week. So you're putting a lot of all sorts of, stressors on your body. So for them, for them, I'm like, look, if you really want to get the most out of this, especially while you're in season, come on in weekly because you're going to
hmm
dive, you're going to jump, you're going to land funny, different things are going to go wrong, right? You're going to continue to put stress on. For someone who works more of, like, let's say, an experienced contractor who is doing more driving job site to job site, maybe isn't putting as much physical stress on their body. Maybe you can get more into the once every other week sort of ordeal. But some of it too, like usually we'll have patients start, let's do once a week. And then, okay, if you're doing good, let's dial back. Let's do once every other week. Okay, if that holds, let's do every 3 weeks. Okay, every 3 weeks, you kind of started feeling something going on again. Okay, your sweet spot's every 2 weeks. Um, Usually the younger they are, the longer they can, go.
yeah,
Typically, there's
yeah. 40s, 50s, 60s are like, I don't know. I think I need it once a week.
yeah, 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 yeah. We do have patients that do come on in once a week, and then, it's all relative to them. You'll have patients who will come on in with congenital issues that will cause different areas of their spine to break down faster. It's like, well, if you really want to stay on top of this is what it takes. And then I always encourage them. You should also be exercising. You should also be eating well. You should be sleeping enough. You should keep your stress levels somewhere manageable. Usually the individuals who are getting adjusted, eating real food, getting adequate amount of hours of sleep, and exercising at least 3 to 4 times a week tend to be in a better mood anyway. And research supports that. So those are the 5 things that I encourage my patients to really focus on most. And I think to that degree too, it sort of simplifies it for them because they, like you mentioned, the phone, the internet world, it's like, oh, you need to do biohacking and you need to do all of this and you need to do XYZ and you need to, you know, cold plunge and
Yeah, no.
stuff. And a lot of that stuff's great, but I'm like, look, what you really need to do if you want to live a longer, more fulfilling life, you should keep your nervous system happy. Getting adjusted does a great job of keeping your nervous system happy. You should exercise, eat well, sleep well.
It's interesting you say that. My buddy and I, he's a cold plunger. And I was telling him, well, honestly, everything's really all about that spine. That kind of holds everything together. I mean, if the spine's not adjusted, then you're going to have ailments. That's when there's the blood flow. It's having a hard time. So then that's where your pain is. And I was thinking about the other day, I have a little dog, little miniature schnauzer. It's my world. And I noticed that every time she wakes up, it's kind of made me think about it. The first thing she does is stretch, does at least 2 or 3 stretches. And I'm like, you know what? That's what I should be doing. I'll be honest. I stretch like before I go work out. I stretch before I play pickleball because I play like 4 or 5 days a week. But I was thinking, why are we not stretching when we get out of bed? That should probably be the first thing instead of running right to the cup of coffee.
Mm-hmm. Motion is lotion. Things and not to be morbid, but things that do not move die, right? If you cast an arm and you uncast the arm, you watch the muscle is atrophied beneath it. So yeah, getting up, starting your day with motion is fantastic. And obviously our phones just are taking over to a certain degree, but the internet hasn't produced all bad things. You can find a lot of really
True.
great mobility pages on YouTube.
Oh,
So
heck
that's
yeah.
usually what I do in the morning is I'll find a 10 to 15-minute mobility video and I'll alternate between upper body and lower body and things like that. But you're right when you make that point in terms of, watching, them wake up and they stretch. Even humans, when we wake up, we should be. It happens less as you get older, but you watch when they wake
Mhm.
up and they stretch. And when we stretch,
You're right.
it is always into the extended position. And a lot of what, adjustments are doing is encouraging extension throughout the spine. And the spine will tend to break down into flexion. So if you want to counteract that force, well, you should be working on extending your spine. You wake up in the morning, extend your spine. There is a specific neurological tract from our brain down to our spinal cord to our muscles that deals solely with extension and posture. And, you know, you, you want to give that practice, right? If you don't use it, you lose it. So, um, you know,
No,
go,
100%. I
yeah,
mean,
start the coffee, move around a little bit, and then by the time you're done, what a nice little reward.
exactly. You know, it's so funny. 20 years ago, everybody would say coffee's great for you. It's great. Now they're saying, oh, it's not good for you. I'm thinking like, you know what? You ain't taking my coffee away. I'm like, hey, you can take everything else. Don't take my cup of coffee away. I don't know. I think that anything can be a bad thing. It's the way you look at it. Like we're talking about the computer. You can basically look up any mobility, anything. It's just how are we using it? I noticed that in your domain name, SpineCo Chiropractic. How did you come up with that? Was that something that you just said, okay, we're just gonna just instead of just chiropractor? I'm just kind of curious.
Well, my main focus in the practice is most certainly the spine, and coming up with the name of the practice, funny enough, was probably one of the most difficult parts. So one of my best friends, I'll shout him out on here. His name is Brody Meyer. He runs a company
Mhm.
called Yorko, actually. And in terms of like from a work ethic standpoint, Brody's been a very inspirational friend to me because we were baseball teammates, and he was the first person that I became friends with where I was like, okay, I think I work hard, and then I watched him work, and I was like, ooh, he works hard. So I was always like, well, I got to work harder. And then he'd see me working harder, and then he would work harder. So we have a really great friendship like this. So he'll probably laugh, but I did steal the concept a little bit from him, where he was Yorko, and I was like, oh, SpineCo. I was like, well, that sounds
Oh,
like a really cool name, and he still works really really hard, and he's such an awesome guy, and so a little bit of that I think is every day I can look at it and it kind of gives me that mental cue of like, okay, I have to work hard for these, you know, I'll look at the schedule and it's like, okay, I have to work hard today for these people, how I have to, because I know Brody's working hard for everybody that he's trying to, sell his
what does he do?
product. It's essentially a system communication software that him and his brother built. It's super unique. They usually will go to like larger companies, and it's a text message based software. I think I'm gonna totally misquote this, but their whole idea was like only 30 something percent of emails are read, and over 95% of text messages are read. So if you're
That's correct.
hard time getting to your teams and your employees and XYZ. And he's got a lot of really awesome clients. I know like the Indianapolis International Airport is with him, and there's a big concrete company out here named Ozinga, and he's got some really cool clients. He's a pretty special dude.
Well, he's working hard.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where SpineCo came from. Was just kind of
Yeah.
like that mental cue of like, yeah, he's
Where do you see your company going? As
yeah.
in, say the next, we'll say 5 years. Just
Yeah, well, that's a really cool question. So originally, I wanted to have several clinics across the Chicagoland area, and the way that the at least the landscape of that works out from like, I mean, from a mathematical standpoint, is I would have to step so far back from chiropractic care that I would have to become a businessman, and that's not, when I reflected on that, that's not really what I want to be at all. I want to be the best chiropractor in the Chicagoland area. Um, whether I achieve that or not, I don't, one only knows, but I really do care about that goal. So I want to continue to get better for my patients, um, and really, really be successful. So, what that has pivoted to is I would like to have a very busy practice and a very accessible location, where I need to hire more assistants to help me manage the flow of the patients, um, at the highest capacity that I can handle where it doesn't inhibit the quality of the care that we provide. So I want to help the most amount of people that I can discover I have the capacity to in one day that doesn't degrade the quality of their care.
It's becoming rare these days, I will tell you. It's interesting. I was at a funeral talking with a friend of mine, and we were just talking about how customer service and care is becoming non-existent very slowly.
Sure.
You know, you've got AI next, we got 5 years from now, AI robots being a chiropractor. I don't see that happening because I wouldn't want them to touch me. I mean, what if they have an off day, right? What if there's a short circuit? I'm good.
Exactly.
I go, hey, I watched the Terminator. I'm good.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh.
Oh Lord, I know, huh? It's like you look at back in that time, then you look at now.
Yeah.
I just always think like, it always seems like we always see the stuff in the movies, and 25 years later, like, what the heck?
Yeah. Yeah. The Matrix.
Oh, don't even go. That's a whole nother red pill. It's today, but I'm like, we always play around with my son and go, that's part of the Matrix.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are in the Matrix. It's like, man, I go, we think we're in so much control,
Yeah.
but really, are we?
We need to keep Keanu Reeves as safe as we can.
I know. Keep a bubble wrap him. Apparently he's doing pretty good right now with all them John Wick movies. Man, I tell you, I love those movies. It all started with a puppy.
Yeah. Well, don't mess with the man's dog.
No, you don't. It's over, man. Anyways, Dr. Ryan, I just want to say thanks so much for being on Great Minds Up today. You are definitely one of those, and I love your passion, your heart for chiropractic, and especially the spine. You hear so much about chiropractic, but I hear very, very less about the spine, which you would think that would be the number one thing because that's what holds everything together. And yeah.
Well, I'll leave everybody with a quote from Hippocrates, the father of medicine. Look to the spine for the cause of all disease. That's a really interesting, and all medical professionals take the Hippocratic oath.
Mm-hmm.
Usually at graduation, or even at their white coat ceremony. So, I really appreciate you having me on. This has been fun. I'm happy to do it again. Let's, chop it up about any sort of topics you'd want in the future. I'd love to come back. This is cool.
Definitely, man. It's so interesting before we land the plane here. I'm still amazed how so many people, and especially chiropractors, do not tell the story of how chiropractic started. Mm. And when I first heard, I believe it was BJ Palmer, he was giving an adjustment to somebody, I believe in the neck, and all of a sudden he could hear. Mm. I believe it was someone that was, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he was either deaf or he was unable to hear out of the ear. I just remember hearing about that story. All of a sudden he could hear. I was like, what the heck? Not saying that chiropractic does that, but.
Sure. Yeah. The story goes, the patient, I forgot how long they said he was without hearing. I think it was like 6 months, or he was near deaf. And then he performed an upper cervical manipulation, and it restored his ability to hear. Now, that particular case, there's a lot of missing details on, and that now there could have been some level of trauma that occurred.
Right.
Who knows? Believe it or not, chiropractic, well, the adjustment and the concepts around the biophysics of it predates Palmer a lot. They definitely, Didi and BJ Palmer were definitely like the pioneers of the, I guess, the chiropractic brand per se. And they were very curious. Didi would study osteopathic medicine from as far as I've read. But you can find chiropractic examples dating all the way back to Hippocrates. So
you're right.
It's on the Hippocratic bench, I believe he called it, where they essentially would traction the spine, much less gently than is done today, and
don't move wrong.
essentially identify subluxations and manipulate them. Not as efficiently as it's probably done now, but you got to start somewhere. So.
Yeah, it's just interesting. When I first heard about it, I was like, that's amazing. Yeah. But I'm sure after all these stories told, they're probably like, oh yeah, he was near death and he was barely. Because, you can be in a room of 50 people and I can say the pizza is cold.
Yeah.
By the time it gets to the 50th person, it's saying, all right, we're all going to Wendy's. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll stick with Socrates, but,
Yeah.
exact, keep it simple. But, thank you
Sure.
so much. And I look forward to definitely doing another one. And I love your passion for the spine, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Let's do it again.
All right. Will do.
Bye.
God bless.